Hey friends, it is good to see you. This week we are talking about how to deal with criticism and feedback and not having emotional meltdowns when we are. I am E. Probilski. If you didn't know, I am the Northeast Regional Head for Author Nation. I am the New England Regional Lead for the Editorial Freelancers Association. I am the head of the Neurodivergent Publishing Conference, and I have been the owner of Insomnia Self-Publishing Services for quite some time. I've been an editor for 17 years, and I'm an author myself, so I'm a lot of things, and I've seen this happen a lot, and I've been on the receiving end of people melting down at me because as an editor, it's my job to tell people where they're not doing things so great. And I've also witnessed other people melting down in public and shooting themselves in the foot. So I wanted to talk about how we can deal with those feelings and how we navigate dealing with that experience without destroying our fan base. One of the most damaging things I've seen in my 17 years in this professional space is when people have these public meltdowns when they're faced with criticism. I mean, we're all going to get criticism, it's an inevitability. And when it happens, and I've seen it happen at all levels of the industry, from people at the absolute top of the heap to people who nobody's ever heard of, and I'm like, well, that's going to be a problem for them and their PR people if they have them, or just a problem for them if they don't. And this isn't to say that all criticism we receive is valid or justified. Uh, and when we receive criticism that isn't valid or justified, we are absolutely allowed to have feelings about it and should push back sometimes in those circumstances. And there are also going to be times when you receive like a 1-star review because somebody thought it was a genre it wasn't, which isn't your fault and is entirely unfair to you in your work, because if they buy one of my novels thinking it's a spicy romance and they discover it is a very not spicy thriller and are disappointed by that, well, okay, but still, responding to that isn't always the right decision. And being a public figure, as we are, comes with a lot of critique, earned and unearned. And I've also seen this happen in like private spaces, like critique groups, writing groups. People will ask for a critique and then not handle the critique very well when they're told that their baby is in fact maybe a little ugly. And I'm not here to shame anybody for having those feelings, but and like I have those feelings when I receive criticism, like it sucks. And as I talk about pretty regularly on here, I'm autistic, and RSD, which is rejection sensitive dysphoria, is a thing for me. It really is, and for most neurodivergent people, we deal with a lot of that. It's a really heavy experience for us, and it's painful. So the emotions aren't the enemy in any way. And I'm not saying that I'm going to shame anybody for having those feelings, but what we do with those feelings is really important. So, when we receive this critical feedback, our first response is usually to defend ourselves and defend our work because it feels like it's a referendum on us, and that hurts. And it feels like somebody's telling us that we're not good enough or that our piece isn't good enough, and that's super painful. And absolutely more so in some ways for artists, because even if it's not a super deep personal truth, art is still a part of our soul that we're showing to the rest of the world. And we're oftentimes our own worst critics, like whether it's music, painting, photography, writing, doesn't matter. We usually see every single flaw in our work and struggle to look beyond that to see the good things. That's a really common thing, and criticism kind of reinforces that feeling and drives us into really bad places sometimes. You know, we've had people telling us that we should just get a real job or that AI is going to replace us, that kind of thing. And it's hard and it's not fun. And as a result of this, a lot of us come to this place where critique is we're fragile. You know, we're not really bolstered up against it, and we need to develop a thick skin and manage that, because unfortunately it's an inevitability. Like I keep saying, it's a bitter pill to swallow. Even when we ask for criticism, if we're asking for feedback in a critique group, it's still gonna hurt. Like there's no getting around it. It's gonna suck. And of course, I'm saying this, our first reaction to critique should be, like, if it hurts, is to take a deep breath and step away and navigate through some of those emotions. I'm going to get into some specific ways to work through those feelings in this post, in this podcast episode, I promise. But the first thing, we need to take a deep breath, recognize that regardless of the source or if the critique is valid or anything else, We need to take a moment to create that emotional distance between ourselves and that feeling and that experience we're having. And if you can do that, you'll be able to approach it in a way that's productive rather than just reactionary. There are, of course, going to be times when you can't get away from the thing and have to address it in the moment, but a lot of the time, we can choose to accept that we're going to have to take a second, take a step, take a breath, and figure out how to emotionally process it. Maybe not then, but maybe a little later, or we can come back to whatever this is a little bit later too. One of the things I mentioned is that need for psychological distance from our response. And as somebody with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, CPTSD, who experiences emotional responses that can be incredibly intense and really overwhelming, one of the most important things I have learned in my many, many years of therapy is the ability to put some space between myself and my emotional reaction. Like, I'll stick a pin in it. I want to make sure that you understand, though, this isn't the same as just burying your feelings. Instead, you're kind of taking a second to reconsider your perspective and your viewpoint without allowing those feelings to just drive the way that I'm engaging with people or engage with a thing. Because if your emotions are in the driver's seat and you don't kind of moderate that, you're going to end up doing a lot of damage real fast to yourself and to others. The Stoics, the ancient philosophers who followed Stoicism, so like Marcus Aurelius, they have suggested that we view events as neutral. This is really important to look at when emotions happen. The first thing is that criticism in and of itself is neutral. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just neutral. To quote Marcus Aurelius from Meditations, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. It sounds really simple on paper, and putting it into practice is hard. It makes us shift our perspective on things and reconsider how we engage with that information, how we take in the information. For example, if we view criticism as entirely neutral, or at the very least not intended to harm us, maybe intended to help us improve, we can change our emotional response to it. It becomes less like an attack and more like some well-meaning advice. That well-meaning advice may or may not be helpful, it might not have been solicited, but it is at least not intended to damage us. That's not the goal here. And it's not usually delivered with actual malice. If it is delivered with actual malice, that's a completely different discussion than navigating criticism and feedback. At that point, you're dealing with somebody who's trying to hurt you, which is a different category of reaction. So understand that I'm not trying to say that if somebody is being truly horrendous and cruel to you, that you need to just be the bigger person and walk away and not have an emotional response to it. But this is more like a 1-star review that may or may not be helpful, or somebody at a critique group says something actually useful but deeply critical of something you've written and that hurts. Excuse me. That is, the ability to detach from that situation is really important. And it also helps other areas of our lives if we think about that Stoic philosophy of events are neutral. So to give an example that isn't writing related, if my spouse forgot to do the dishes again, and I come home to a sink full of dirty dishes and a messy kitchen, again, after a really long day of work, it might be tempting to start making assertions about whether or not my partner respects me, values my time, whether or not he cares. And there are sometimes valid times to make those assessments and think in that way. But in my circumstance, my partner has ADHD and physical disabilities, and him not doing the dishes has nothing to do with me. It's a neutral fact. There are many reasons the dishes might not be done. And our feelings at that same time are legitimate. That frustration of, I just finished a day of work and I'm exhausted and now I have to deal with this and this sucks. And I wasn't supposed to have to deal with this. That is actually one of the key elements that many the manosphere Stoics miss and seem to forget, is that emotions are not your enemy here. In fact, the whole point of Stoicism was to help people regulate their emotions rather than be ruled by them. But they weren't trying to delete the emotions, they were just trying to take a step back and manage them. The feelings still exist, but if you view things with the right perspective and the right lens, sometimes it can help you let go of some of the feelings of like it's personal. And that regulation is not deletion. It's teaching ourselves to have the freedom to experience our feelings while also not necessarily being ruled by those feelings. For example, going back to the dishes, if I storm upstairs immediately and lay into my partner because the dishes aren't done, only to find out that he injured himself or was dealing with something far more important or pressing that benefits both of us or is very necessary for him, or maybe something happened, or maybe he got sidetracked because he was trying to do something really nice for me and lost track of time. If I go up there all hammer and tongs and yell at him, I will have done a lot of damage. I'm not going to be doing anything to help. It won't make sure he does the dishes next time. It's just going to hurt him and cause a fight. Instead, if I approach that situation with the neutrality and ask him, hey, what happened? I thought you were going to do the dishes and we talked about this. I can regulate my emotional reaction and make sure I'm not causing him harm in the process. And maybe there is a valid reason he didn't do the dishes, and I can be like, all right, well, that's why. Let's get them done. Or, if necessary, I'll just handle them myself. Sometimes it's necessary, or sometimes you just leave a sink full of dirty dishes overnight because that's just how the day went. Emotional regulation and distance gives us the opportunity to assess the nature of the situation with a clear head and make a logical, rational, reasonable decision based on the data points rather than just a knee-jerk emotional reaction that probably causes more harm than good. At the beginning, I promised there would be some techniques for creating emotional distance, and these are where we're going to go. How do you do it? Is it just something that people do? Well, yes and no. And it's not about repressing our feelings, so then what is it? Well, there's a million different ways you can deal with emotional regulation. Some are more helpful than others to different people, and every individual will find different methods that work well for them. So please don't assume that just because something on this list that I'm about to read doesn't work for you, that you're doing it wrong, or that you're a failure of some kind. It might just not be the method that works for you. Just like with writing, the only wrong way is the way that doesn't work for you, right? So, let's dig into these a little bit. So first, like I mentioned earlier, take a time out. The first order of business is to step out of that situation if you can and take a breath. If you're at a critique group and you're in person with the person criticizing you, maybe just excuse yourself to the bathroom for a minute and, have some you time or wash your face. If it's something that's less immediately physical, like an email or a social media post or something, you can give yourself a couple hours before you respond, if you respond at all. Sometimes sleeping on it helps. Like, I've had times where I had to deal with a really difficult decision and I thought about it all day and then decided to sleep on it, and then the next day I had an answer I didn't the day before because I had allowed my emotions to cool off. You have to give yourself a timeline for this, though, because one thing to understand is that you do have to come back to the thing. Whether it is an immediate return, 5 minutes, 10 minutes tomorrow, whatever it is, you need to make sure you come back, because otherwise it's just avoidance, and avoidance does not pay good dividends. There is a distinct difference between making the intentional choice to allow something, just let something go. That is different than avoiding things. Avoiding things is more of a knee-jerk response, where letting go is an intentionality. And spending some time engaging in emotional regulation kind of lets the storm pass, and then you can decide, is this something I actually do need to deal with, or can I just maybe allow it to just go on and not have anything to say about it? If it's a bad review, then you can just kind of let it go and, alright, well, that's a bad review. Alright, fine, I guess. Giving yourself some time and space is one of the best ways I can think of to prevent immediate explosions. And it might just be a couple minutes. If you need like 5 minutes, take the 5 minutes if you can. That is probably the number one suggestion. The second one I have is breathing. And this is talked about a lot in anxiety places and like anti-anxiety techniques. And deep breathing is a super important thing you can engage in for emotional regulation of all kinds. This can include like box breathing, where you inhale, hold your breath, and exhale for certain counts, and you do that rhythmically for a little bit. Or just being aware of your breath and feeling your body as you breathe. So you inhale, you feel the air in your lungs, you feel the expansion of your ribs, and then you can feel the relief of that tension as you exhale. When we're in an elevated emotional state, we tend to breathe faster and harder, and we aren't really thinking about it. And when we're doing that, it kind of keeps the cycle going. And if we intentionally regulate our breathing, we can calm the system down. This isn't like just psychology, this is actually biology and neurology. We can tell our nervous systems to come back down out of fight, flight, or freeze. We're not being attacked by tigers. We can chill that response a little bit out. And I want to address the fact that fight, flight, or freeze, and fawn is also one of them, but they are legitimate, natural, inborn, base level human instincts. When we are challenged in those ways, when we are dealing with something that we feel is a threat, whether it's a psychological threat, a physical threat, emotional threat, the fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn instincts are innately triggered. Our nervous system goes into protection mode. And everybody experiences that in one way or another. So the breathing actually helps pull us out of that space by using our neurology to calm us down. Another recommendation I've seen a lot too is to inhale longer than you exhale, or exhale longer than you inhale. This element of focus and control helps us keep our attention on the activity because we're kind of paying attention to the inhale and the exhale, so if we're counting or whatever it is. And it forces us to think about how our bodies are functioning and make that an intentional thing for just a short time. And that pulls us out of that emotional state, that emotional arousal state. For me, I generally favor taking slow breaths and feeling without counting because as a trained singer and an asthmatic, box breathing and the counting stuff usually causes me more trouble than it helps, and I can get dizzy sometimes, so I find if I tend to zero in on the feeling of my breathing, that works well for me. For some people, focusing on their breathing that intensely can cause more anxiety than it helps. So if you find it stressing you out, cool, we've got other options on this list, so please don't, overdo the breathing thing. And we can move on to the next one. So the next one I'd suggest is grounding. Find something that helps you feel connected to your body. For some people, a lot of neurodivergent people, you're going to hear this: floor time. Lie down on the floor. It might be a thing that helps you feel better. If you have access to it, maybe go for a walk. Or if you can, just put some bare feet on soil or grass. For other people, maybe you'll take a break and do some yoga. Whatever you're doing, you want to focus on feeling your body and feeling connected to that. Whatever this looks like for you, take some time to make that connection with your body and your environment. If you're not at home, maybe close your eyes for a minute and focus on the feeling of where your body is connected to the chair or your feet on the floor. Wherever you're at, feel the thing holding your body up on the earth. I know it sounds like woo-woo stuff, I promise, but it isn't. You can connect with those things, and it helps kind of the feeling of where you are in space. Another option to this, of course, if you can, is exercise. Exercise helps to lower the adrenaline, it helps lower the cortisol, all these stress hormones that build up. Exercise is great. If you can do just a couple jumping jacks, or just shake out your hands and arms, or rub your hands together, clench your fists as hard as you can and then release them intentionally. You don't have to go to the gym and do a major workout. You could just do things that bring your awareness to your body. Wherever your physical availability is at, even if you're just okay, I'm sitting in my wheelchair. I'm feeling the way my back is touching the back of the wheelchair. And I can flex my shoulders and then relax them. And then flex them and then relax them. Even if it's something like that, it's just something to connect your body and your mind and put them back in touch with each other. Once you have dealt with some of those immediate feelings and emotions and come out of that fight or flight, our next effort here is going to be considering our perspective. If we remove ourselves from the situation and shift our perspective and think about how this might be if we were somebody else. So If you have a child or your best friend or your partner and they're going through something like what you're going through, maybe they got rejected for their book being published by somebody, that is going to suck. Of course it is. But if we look at the perspective as this is somebody whom I love and they're having this emotional response, what do I do to help them? And it kind of creates this arm's length feeling between you and the situation because it's not you, it's somebody. And also, you can view the situation objectively. If the critique you received from the critique group, assuming that you were in one, wasn't intended to hurt you, somebody who's genuinely trying to help, well, eating their face probably isn't appropriate. Even if their recommendations were entirely unhelpful, it's still not a good idea to eat their face, probably. And if they're not trying to harm us and we're having this reaction because we feel attacked, should we react and lash out in the same way? Are we actually being targeted by somebody for something? Is there another motive to this critique? We can take a look at these things from that perspective and then put into place whether or not we react to that thing and how we choose to react to that thing. It might feel satisfying in the moment to blast somebody with a very angry comment or send a nasty email or something like that. But in the future, those comments are probably not going to be the things we want anybody to know that we have done. We are not going to feel like those are a good representation of us, probably. And it might color how other people interact with us. So we really want to think about, okay, we've taken a step back. How do I want to engage with this? If this was somebody else, what advice would I give them? And that kind of brings us to the last point on the emotional regulation checklist here is talk things out with somebody. Find a friend or maybe a small group of friends or somebody to talk through your feelings with. You can show them the review or the email or whatever it is that upsets you if you can, and ask them what they think about that response. And much like removing yourself from the situation, sometimes asking the opinion of others is really useful. If I don't have a person that I can ask the details to, or of in this moment, sometimes I will use Goblin Tools. They have a judge tool, and it can tell you whether or not the tone of this thing is as mean as it felt. And I use that thing pretty regularly when it's something I'm not sure if I'm judging the tone correctly, because being autistic, I struggle with tone sometimes, and sometimes I don't understand the way something is intended, and it's a problem for me. And I know it's a problem for me, so I have to use caution with that, especially when I'm feeling really strongly about what I received. Like, if I'm having real big feelings about it, there's a good chance that I maybe misjudged the tone. And so I double check that. This external, break check on us can both help us feel supported by the people we go to for advice and help, and it offers us the opportunity to make sure that we're not reacting to this in a way that's going to be more negative than helpful, and it gives us a chance to receive support from others, and that can also help with the emotional regulation and help us feel better and stronger in ourselves. Feeling supported and connected to our communities has a number of mental health benefits. They are important things for us. So that active connection can be really important. However, I do want to make sure that you understand that this is supposed to be like a one-to-one or a one to a small enclosed group of people. Don't just go diving into a large group with all these feelings and vomit them all over the group. It probably won't make you look very good if you can avoid that. So just as a recommendation, just make sure that you're careful about where you do this and who you do it with. But if you've got a couple of close friends or some author friends that you can be like, hey, I got this rejection, can you double check that I'm not overreacting to this? Or I got this review, can you see if I'm responding appropriately to this? Or just can you read this thing? Holy crap, look at this BS they sent me. I'm so mad right now. Somebody share this moment with me. All of those things are valid, and they prevent you from taking that into unhealthy places. So we've gone over what you should do, and now I'd like to just briefly address what not to do, because we've talked a lot about what to do, so here's a quick list of things that I don't think we should probably do, and I'm sure you're going to pick up on why very quickly as I answer each of these. We don't respond in anger. We do not make aggressive public statements as a rule. Again, there is an exemption here for actual bigotry and other things where there's a time for making a forceful public statement, but just because we got a bad review is not usually it. We are not going to be unkind, particularly if the criticism was solicited, or particularly if it's us requesting to be included in something. Like, don't be unkind to the people on the other end of this, because there are people at the other end of this. Do not put the person giving you the critique on blast on social media, again, unless the critique was done in bad faith. Like, I've gotten anti-trans comments on various different social medias over the last few years, and those people, I have definitely put them on blast a few times. But that's an example of bigotry versus criticism. And we're talking about criticism here, not people doing things in bad faith like that was. Don't be unprofessional in your reaction in public. If you are at a critique group, don't, melt down, yell at the person, and stomp out of the room. That's not going to earn you any favors, and it's not going to help you in the long run. I really recommend against that. Take a 5-minute bathroom break, excuse yourself, go stand outside if you need a minute. Definitely do that. But don't flounce. It's not a good look on anybody. Do not melt down in places that could shape others' opinion of you. Have a good cry or a rant with close friends, but don't do those things in public where other people can see you. And your Facebook wall is pretty close to public, even if you have it set to friends only, unless you have a very small group of friends. And also, finally, don't give up. It can feel tempting to give up, or the criticism is right, so why bother? Don't let that lay eggs in your brain. Don't give up just because you received some negative feedback or some criticism, or got told no. Giving up is not the answer to all of this. Where we go from here, unfortunately, rejection is part of our industry, and it's part of life. We can't avoid it, we can't react to it every single time because that would be exhausting. And there will be a point in your career where you're public enough that you get negative comments from random people you've never met who, up until that moment, didn't know you exist and you didn't know they existed. It's kind of unavoidable. Unless you quit before you reach that point in your career where you reach those people and get those comments. And if you do quit before that point, you're not a failure. I'm not criticizing you for having decided something isn't for you. Being a public figure's hard. It just is. So if you decide it's not going to work for you, that's okay. There's no shame in that. And I mean, that said, if you're in this podcast, the intent for all of us is to be big rock stars living in hilltop houses, driving how many cars? Sorry, bad joke. Accepting critique is important for us to grow and develop as authors as well as people. It will never not sting to be criticized. It's never going to stop hurting. Our reaction can determine whether or not we shoot our careers in the knee or whether we grow from that point and continue onward. And that's really what I want to get at here. And developing a thick skin is absolutely necessary in our industry. It just is. It's going to be something you have to work on. You're going to have to let things slide off of you, bounce off of you, because you're going to get it at certain points. It's going to be tough. But we have to protect our mental health as we move forward into this, and we have to protect ourselves and build the skills we need in order to deal with that criticism. And there is no better time to work on developing those skills than before you're at the point where you really need to use them. It's kind of like taking a first aid class and getting a certification and hoping you never have to use it, but if you ever end up in a circumstance where it's necessary, well, you'll have had the training. And this is exactly the same. That is it for this week. I hope everybody has a great week. If you have questions, please send me a comment, drop me a line. I'm more than happy to engage with people. I'm more than happy to help you deal with some of these feelings too, if you need to talk. So please feel free to drop me a comment on whatever social media platform you're hearing this on. And if you're on a platform where you can't do that, you can find me on social media all over the place at E.H. Przybylski, P as in Paul, R-Y, B as in boy, Y-L, S as in Sam, K-I. E.H. Przybylski is my username across most social media platforms. And you can find me, tag me, ping me, message me, whatever it is. And I will be glad to hear from you. I hope that I will be back for you next week. It's been a long couple of weeks. The weather has been really kicking me. The transition from winter into spring and from fall into winter always really messes with me, so physically I've been hurting. I'm doing okay, but that's why I've been less regular with the podcasts. That, and I've had a bunch of things going on. I gave a talk at a college last week. I've got a ghostwriting project I'm really deep in on, so hopefully I will be able to put together a video for next week. But we will see. In that case, I will catch you then, and I hope you have a great day. Take care of yourselves, friends. I'll talk to you soon.